Aperture.
My name's Chris Boot. I'm the Executive Director of the Aperture Foundation. I'm standing in for Darren at a moment's notice because as a result of the slightly late start and his emergency trip to India, he's had to go, sadly. But I'm really just here to welcome you all, to thank you all, and especially and above all Sarah, who's been an amazing person to work with. Amazing. Thank you for everything. And hand over to, who am I handing over to? Michael Famighetti, the editor of Aperture magazine.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Famighetti, the editor of Aperture magazine, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to celebrate the release of Vision&Justice. I cannot think of a more beautiful and appropriate place to celebrate this special project. And I would like to thank Darren Walker and the Ford Foundation team for hosting this event. Tonight is a truly special occasion for Aperture. The journey to create the Vision&Justice issue began about 10 months ago when I mentioned to the photographer LaToya Ruby Frazier, who unfortunately I don't think is here tonight. She's here? Oh, hi. Okay, I think she's in France, but but I mentioned to LaToya that we wanted to create an issue of the magazine addressing photography and African-American experience. And when I asked LaToya for her idea about who could be a guest editor, I believe she said emphatically, hands down, Sarah Lewis is the person. You just need to talk to Sarah Lewis. And Sarah is here, thankfully. And she could not have been more correct. When Sarah and I met to discuss how this issue might take shape, she immediately began to discuss photography in relationship to notions of justice and citizenship. She described some initial ideas of artists and writers who might be featured in the issue, including an interview with the visionary filmmaker Ava DuVernay, and Ava's conversation with cinematographer Bradford Young, a powerful discussion addressing cinema and representation, became one of the highlights of the issue. And as with many of the other ideas that we discussed in that first meeting, it has been incredibly exciting to see each piece come to fruition. And that's in thanks to Sarah's incredibly clear and focused vision. It was like this thing was completely mapped out when we first met. And in this issue, we were honored to publish the work of visionary artists and photographers, as well as leading voices in art history, literature, theater, and music. The historical sweep of the issue and the confluence of distinct styles and forms, the conceptual, the documentary, the vernacular, underscores photography's unique function across time, which I think Sarah would describe as photography's corrective power. I'm truly in awe of the work assembled in this issue and the people who are in this room tonight. I believe that Vision&Justice is essential reading on photography's transformative power, its ability to change lives, minds, and set and reset a dialogue. Within the pages of this issue, we hope to begin a conversation that is ever more urgent as photography becomes more ingrained and therefore more potent in our everyday experience of the world, our experience of politics, identity, beauty, family, and citizenship. In addition to the print edition of the magazine, I encourage everyone to look out for a wide array of online exclusive content at aperture.org, which extends the themes found in the print issue. These special features, interviews, and profiles will be released over the coming weeks and months and will provide another platform for debate and discussion. In looking ahead to related exhibition and book projects, we intend for the vision that Sarah Lewis has brought to Aperture to reverberate across all of our programming for years to come. It's a great privilege now to share this project with you tonight. The project is just becoming public, and so I think we're just beginning to really understand its enormity and gravitas. So I will now invite Sarah to introduce the issue and tonight's program in greater detail.
This is a good evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Michael, so much.
Thank you, Chris Boot, and thank you in spirit, Darren Walker. I want to start by thanking Darren because it's of great significance for me that he offered this space to launch this Vision and Justice issue. Not only is the Ford Foundation very close to where I grew up, and my parents are here, I should thank them as well. Yeah, my mother and father. Yeah, just up the street. But this is the place where I conceived this project, ultimately. I came for what I thought would just be a breakfast, a catch-up with Darren Walker, and he encouraged me to think through this nascent idea I had about this nexus of vision and justice in art and citizenship, and push it to its fullest kind of logical extent with the beginnings of an initiative through this Aperture issue. As many of you who know Darren understand, he has an infectious kind of enthusiasm about him, right? You feel as if you've kind of received a sort of vitamin supplement when you're around him. And so I left just buoyed by his encouragement and excitement, and I feel that as I'm standing here today. I guess the testament to that is the fact that he had to leave unexpectedly for this trip to India. I was told about this a few days ago. And he saw the excitement of all of us gathered, and he said, "No, don't start the program early for me. No, I'm going to go. You start the program, Sarah. This is your project." So I'm thrilled to be able to open it here in the Ford Foundation, and want to make sure I thank all of those who've made this evening possible. Kristen Jarvis and her fantastic team. We have Shar and Robin and Paul and Juliana. Thank you all for inviting us all into this space today. I could not have imagined a better partner for this project than Michael Famighetti. The day you called me, I was halfway around the world. I remember when you invited me to guest edit this issue, and as you said, I thought of no other theme but vision and justice. But what I could not have anticipated is that in you turning over the keys to me, so to speak, to Aperture, and inviting me to populate the pages with a universe of kind of freedom thinkers and image makers, that I would have found in you a partner for this ongoing collaborative work, and it's just been a true privilege and a joy to work with you. So thank you, Michael. I also certainly want to thank Dana Trish and Brendan Wattenberg and Chris Boot for this enormous enthusiasm and commitment that you have to a project with a great deal of weight, but also a great deal of pleasure and fun. So thank you. So I'm going to offer a framework for the issue. I really want to get out of the way, though, because we have a fantastic program following me. The journey to honor the dignity and humanity and the fullness of human life cannot be waged without pictures. This is something I've come to understand, and this is what Frederick Douglass knew. In this now better known but once long forgotten speech that he gave during the Civil War, which my colleague John Stauffer has written a great deal about, and Henry Louis Gates and others, he spoke about what the nation was just beginning to understand. This new technology could actually transform how we saw the world. He called this speech Life Pictures and Pictures in Progress, and he would go on to redraft this speech 3 times over the course of his life. He would confuse his audience when he gave this speech. They didn't quite understand what he meant about not just the power of an image, but the way in which it can transform your vision of the world. At the end of one of his speeches, Douglass very poignantly said, it might take us a century or more to understand this idea. I'm paraphrasing. I think who he had in mind was a scholar who's let us see the epiphanic power of photography very clearly. I think one of the thinkers he had in mind is someone who I also want to honor through this issue, and that is Deborah Willis. Now, Deborah Willis is the first person I called after Michael Famighetti invited me to do this issue, right? And it's with your blessing that I was able to create this enormous kind of panoply in this issue here. I'm going to reserve my remarks about Deb Willis because we have a large, significant part of this program dedicated to honoring her. through Hank Willis Thomas's tribute, but I will say that I know that I am in your lineage when I do this work, and I hope to honor it with all the teaching and curatorial projects and writing that I go on to do. So thank you so much for what you offer the field. The reason why this project is also very personal to me and is because it's meant to also honor my grandfather. My grandfather, as you might know if you've read the editor's note, I won't go into in great detail, but he grew up here in New York City, and in high school, when he was in the 11th grade, he asked where African Americans were in history books. And when his teacher told him that we had done nothing to merit inclusion, he wouldn't take that for an answer. He, in fact, my mother tells me, showed his teacher a book that proved that there were other stories to be told. But because of his impertinence, he was expelled in the 11th grade for asking that question. And I never understood until I was a teenager, an adult, why he turned to the arts, why he became a painter, a jazz musician, instead of becoming perhaps an activist after this happened. But from him, I came to understand that the arts are not a respite from life, a kind of a luxury, but instead are a critical transforming agent for how it is that we expand our sense of who is a citizen in this country and what constitutes full human life. My mother told me about this book that my grandfather showed that teacher just this morning, in fact. I didn't know that he had evidence to offer back to that teacher. So I have to think that he is in the room tonight smiling about this Aperture issue, knowing that his granddaughter is now a professor at Harvard of African and African American Studies and Art History and is continuing this work. Yeah. I actually have his initials. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Lewis. His was Shadrach Emmanuel Lee. His name is much cooler than mine, but it's okay. But I mention all this to say that the title for the issue, the theme, Vision and Justice, is deliberate. It's really meant to honor this phenomenon of how the world that we live in is shaped through pictures, through our vision of them, as Douglas saw it, as Deborah Willis shows it to us, as my grandfather understood it. I think there's an urgency to this topic now. I think we're living in a time where we understand that the relationship and the quest for full citizenship requires an advanced state of visual literacy. In front of us are images of injustice that might have been unimaginable decades ago because of the scale and speed of technology. We've had to ask ourselves certain questions that rely upon visual analysis as we read images of, say, Eric Gardner's arrest or other citizens facing injustice. But what I'd like for this issue to remind us of is that it's the artist who knows what images need to be seen to affect change and to alter history, to shine a spotlight in ways that will result in sustained, enduring attention. These are artists such as those in front of me. We have Lyle Ashton Harris and Carrie Mae Weems and Ava DuVernay and Bradford Young and the many who populate these pages. Let me advance to the full lineup in the issue of the artist here. This is a slide of our many contributors that we've included, and it required the firepower of the scholars and writers who you see featured here to pay full tribute to their work. I'm almost tempted to read each person's name aloud. It's such a fantastic lineup, but it doesn't stop there. We do have a great set of online contributors as well who've offered phenomenal issues that will be rolled out over the course of 3 months. Is that right, Michael? 2 or 3 months. Guest editing this issue of Aperture has made me mindful of my commitment to all of these artists and writers and playwrights and filmmakers who, like my grandfather, see this inextricable nexus between vision and justice. And I'd like to dedicate this issue in public to my grandfather's memory here today. Now, for the sake of time, I'd like to offer a few more set of thanks and then introduce our set of speakers here. I really could go around this room and thank nearly everyone, because all of you are committed to the theme that we're celebrating here tonight. Oh, what a great evening. I want to thank my colleagues at Harvard. I see John Stauffer here. Thank you for the inspiration that you offer and the commitment to furthering this work. It's an honor to have you in the issue. There are a number of curators and museum directors, Adam Weinberg, I think, from the Whitney, and Jennifer Blessing, and Zoe Whitley, and phenomenal scholars and colleagues from Cheryl Finley, great writers, Don Davis, editors, and Cherise Fisher. And my goodness, I really could go through every row. I thank you all for the support that you've offered me along the way for this project. I want to also thank my Cullman Fellows who've seen me put this Aperture issue together over the course of these last 10 months. Eric Simonoff and David Lavin, thank you for handling everything such that I can just work, which is what you know I like to do. Now, for this program, we really could have just had a cocktail party, but I wanted to be able to celebrate the heft of the ideas that give this issue such gravitas through a set of readings. I'm thrilled to be able to start off the set of readings with a passage from my book, The Rise, that I wrote about Frederick Douglass, read to us by the inimitable Sarah Jones. It's an honor to have you here. The work that you do transforms us by how you embody the identities of others who we might not feel connected to, but through your work see our connection to so deeply. So thank you for that work, and I'm just honored to have you here before we have Hank Willis Thomas offer a tribute to Deb Willis. Now, he will offer her a tribute that only he can. And I'm excited for that. And will be followed by Carrie Mae Weems, who will speak about her landmark set of images, the Kitchen Table series, I believe. Yes? Will you? Yes? Okay, she agrees. I see. Because she could speak about any of her images, and it would be. This is a series that Franklin Sermons, one of our colleagues, has called a hallmark of an era. I think the Kitchen Table series, though, is a very modest term for the series because it's really a body of work that shows us how it is that we become our fullest selves. Right? This is what her work allows us to understand. I could go on and on about it, but I want to just invoke one other person who wanted to be here tonight, Elizabeth Alexander. One of the interventions that Carrie's work makes is to show us what I think Elizabeth would call the black interior, right? This, I think, is the revolution in photography, one of them that Carrie's work has made. Garnette Cadogan is here tonight, and he will offer us a reading of his beautiful piece on Rudy Roy's photographs, which use the platform of Instagram to democratize our photography practice. Margo Jefferson is here as well. I think that's all I need to say. Margo Jefferson is here as well. But she's going to read her fantastic piece on Lorna Simpson, who is also here tonight, I think. Oh, it's not at her. Oh, she came. Oh, thank you, my goodness. And it is just so, now you see why I want to conclude my remarks, because there's so much in front of us. But I couldn't do so without first thanking the final two speakers, Chelsea Clinton and Khalil Gibran Muhammad. Now, so much of this work that's in front of you is really animated by my desire to have the arts be seen as contributory, as part of what we consider to be service in this country. And there are many things I could say about the ways in which my friendship with Chelsea has inspired me, but I think that is the most important. You being here reminds me of how much our conversations has given me a sense of commitment to that idea. And the fact that you're reading the piece that, second to Douglas, James Baldwin's piece, The Creative Process, how much that piece animated my thinking about this is just invaluable to me. So thank you for making the time and coming. And we will conclude with a set of remarks by Khalil on the indomitable Jamel Shabazz, who is here. Where is he? Jamel Shabazz. I know he's here. In fact, I walked in this evening and thought I would sort of beat the crowd here. And there he was in the lobby with a gift for me, saying, "Thank you, sister, for your work." we are ending with a tribute to his Honor and Dignity series, and I think that is only fitting, because that is the exact theme that this issue is meant to honor. Khalil and Chelsea were both coming from prior events, and Darren is off to India. And I think that shows you also the impact that the people who support this idea are having in the world. Khalil is coming from the Jewish Museum, and Chelsea came from NYU, and this is just, I think, a testament to the commitment to this idea that is not going to end with the Aperture issue itself. So, by way of conclusion, I should say this is just the beginning. In August at the Harvard Art Museums, there's an exhibition that I've curated that will open. It's on the same theme of vision and justice, and it will run until January, have a quick break, and resume this US tour that Aperture will organize, complete with, am I correct, a full exhibition catalog. Is that right, Chris? I'm just kidding. I'm not strong-arming him. He already agreed. We're doing the book. So I hope to see you at many future events. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Yeah. And without further ado, the other Sarah Jones.
Pretty cool to get to be the other Sarah tonight. And as you know, I'm usually hermetically sealed into one-person showdom, so thank you for giving me a chance to come out and play with others. This is an extraordinary gathering. I'm so grateful to be here with you, and congratulations. And thank you to Aperture. So what you're going to hear is an excerpt that references a scene in 1861 at Boston's Tremont Temple, where a crowd was gathered to hear Frederick Douglass speak. At a time when orators were analogous to star athletes, and the stage could resemble a boxing ring, Frederick Douglass's will, skill, style, and intellectual prowess proved to nearly all, as one journalist put it, that this is an extraordinary man, cut out for a hero. As a speaker, he has few equals. We will never know how Douglass said it, but we do know that the audience was largely silent as he focused on the critical role of what some might consider irrelevant in the face of a nation-severing conflict, that of the Civil War. Namely, pictures and the images that they might conjure in one's imagination. In his speech, titled Pictures and Progress, which he rewrote 3 times over the course of his life, Douglass fervently made the case that the key to the great mystery of life and progress was the ability of men and women to fashion a mental picture and to let his or her entire world be affected by it. He went on to describe the whole soul of man as a sort of picture gallery, a grand panorama. This inward picture-making faculty, Douglass said, the human capacity for artful, imaginative thought, is what permits us to accurately see the picture of life contrasted with the fact of life, or the ideal contrasted with the real. All that is really peculiar to humanity, he said, proceeds from this one faculty or power. Perhaps most surprising may not be that Douglass said this, but when he said it. At a time of unthinkable retrenchment and national fracture, when there was blood on the fields. He would continue, though the audience had come expecting to hear a lecture about the Civil War and its union-slashing effects, rather than an ode to the power of pictures. It was not the first time that Douglass had lectured about the nexus of race, imagery, and citizenship. He spoke about the force of pictures at length in 1854. the year of the release of the widely known antebellum racial treatise Types of Mankind by Josiah Clark Knott and George Glidden, which placed the head of the famous Apollo Belvedere sculpture next to a chimpanzee and a gape-mouthed black man in order to show a hierarchy of human races and polygenesis. A few years earlier, in 1850, leading naturalist Louis Agassiz had commissioned photographer J.T. Zeiley to take daguerreotypes of bare-chested and bare-breasted African and American-born slaves in South Carolina in an attempt to prove his polygenesis views. Douglas was arguing that pictures, the same medium that was being used to read the Negro out of the human family, could be subversively used to read him back in. Douglas was asking the conceptual questions we are still wrestling with today. What does it mean to grapple with images, particularly in times of crisis? What are the ways in which images have not only codified but ruptured our conceptions of race and citizenship? He was making a case for the epiphanic power of an image to shift our vision of the world. Sarah, thank you for doing your part to shift our vision of the world. And thank you all.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here for many, many reasons. I can tell you how much my mother, as we all do, adores Sarah, and how well she keeps us on our toes. Because anything I would be afraid of doing, it's following one of my favorite minds and then one of my favorite artists, talking about my favorite person and then followed by one of my favorite artists. In front of so many of my favorite artists and minds. But that being said, I would be remiss if I did not do what I like to do, which is shake it up and ask each of you to do a little bit of work. If you are on social media, you can go on Instagram and take a photograph of the person next to you. And hashtag Vision&Justice, because people are going to want to remember this moment. And I think we can create a collective archive. So just take a moment to do this. And if you know the person's name, hashtag that. If you don't, ask them. So, my favorite thing. We'll do it together. Selfie. So my favorite thing about photographs and photography is the moment someone puts a camera near our faces. We have this instinct. There's my dad, all late. Dad, I'm honoring my mom. Typical. But what happens when a camera is put up, almost all of us have this instinct to smile. And it's because we're actually feel the need that if we're going to be remembered, we want to be remembered in a positive space as a positive person. And there's this message that we believe we're sending to people we don't know in every image. And so thank you. It was so beautiful watching you guys just go from to. And I think there's a lot of work to be done, but there's also a lot of fun to be had. And so on that note, I want to start with a person whose voice you'll hear later in a different form.
It seems to me that the honest struggle for his integrity must be considered as a metaphor for the struggle which is universal and daily of all human beings on the face of this terrifying globe to get to become human beings. What we might get at this evening, if we are lucky, if the mic doesn't fail, if my voice holds out, if you ask me questions, is what the importance of this effort is.
Now, when you were starting out as a writer, you were a black, impoverished, homosexual. You must have said to yourself, gee, how disadvantaged can I get?
He said I hit the jackpot.
If it's so outrageous, you could not go any further, you know. So you had to find a way to use it.
James Baldwin, who are you?
First of all, I'm speaking as an American citizen. I'm speaking also as a grandson of a slave.
My mother was born in Maryland, my father was born in New Orleans, I was born in New York.
Someone who represents a very complex country which insists on being simple-minded.
If I were...
So just that's an excerpt from a piece I did called "The Purse is More Important Than Anything Else," and it's using a lot of the footage I found through first a film called "The Price of the Ticket," but also everything I could find online, because we have so much online. And I realized that so many of the issues that James Baldwin was speaking about were relevant to today in this moment. But this notion that an artist's struggle for their integrity is a metaphor for the struggle for every person to become a human being is really potent, because I think in each of us, we're trying to figure out how to become our best selves. And what are those questions? And the question, when do they come to us? How do we realize what our calling is, so to speak? And for a person in this room, maybe many people in this room, it was when they first saw this book, The Sweet Fly Paper Life by Roy de Carava and Langston Hughes, who photographed African American life in the 50s and were capable and determined to publish the book along with the writing. And the images that were presented in this book were very different than the images that mainstream society was creating and sharing about African American life. And there was a little black girl in North Philadelphia who was went to Philadelphia Public Library and saw this book and around this time, and she was, I guess, shocked and disturbed by how little she knew about life, and where were the rest of the images. And so when she grew up, she went on to actually study photography, which wasn't really an art at the time. But also, when she was studying photography, she asked one of her professors about where are all the African American photographers in this legacy, this history of African American photography, of American photography that you talk about, the history of photography. And she didn't know. So like any good professor, she put the work on her student and said, you should write an independent study. And so this is something I found sifting through my mother's papers once. And 3 years before I was born, she wrote, and this essay, I can't really see that well, I found no standard art history that refers to any Afro-American artist. References have led me to other references which are scanty. I've written 50 letters to possible resources and have had enthusiastic feedback to my work. And then she has this list which is written of 10 photographers that she hopes to visit, but then you can see one of them, Monita Sleet, is written in. And what's profound to me is that, did you know Monita Sleet at the time? So Monita Sleet is a photographer who's most known for his Pulitzer Prize winning photograph of Coretta Scott King holding her daughter at the funeral of Martin Luther King. But seeing that many of these people who my mother didn't know at the time became her best friends and her mentors and my mentors is amazing. To think that she started this project way back then as a college student and then started this other project not soon after. And I'm supposed to be an only child, but really I grew up with many other of her babies. The first one being her first book, Black Photographers, 1840 to 1940, a biobibliography, and which is the title is revealing, but it's also in a very subtle way. It says Black Photographers 1840 to 1940, a biobibliography. When we think about the United States in 1840 and what black life was like in 1840, we don't actually think about the fact that there were people of African descent that were on the cutting edge of science, of technology, of critical thought and art. And how does that break up our narrative of this uniform black experience? Somebody had to have other values than just thinking about oppression. People were looking forward and needing to record, and the images they were creating was very different than the images that mainstream society was creating. And so that led to, in the next book, Black Photographers 1840 to 1988, and that led to the next book, which led to the next book, which led to the next book, which led to the next book, and 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 the next, and the next, and the next book, 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 and this is an incredible journey of exploration, and I think she's met, and I've met so many of the people in this room on this journey of building this relationship through people who don't take history for granted, recognize that it's an area to be mined and to be discovered, and so that we can provide a better future for ourselves and for our children by recognizing that everyone, no matter their station in life, has something valuable to offer. And being looking so much like my mother, I have the luxury of not being able to get away with anything, because she said she used to go places, and I used to go places and I'd be Deb's son, and now she goes places and she's Hank's mom. And so I really am grateful to be following in her footsteps, as awkwardly as I may do it from time to time, but I think I'm cute about it. I learned that from my dad. And I'm so grateful to see Sarah and her parents, to see and recognize how many of us are, the children of people who just didn't live within the mold that society has created for us. And I'm so happy that you're here, Chelsea, because I think we're watching an incredible thing too by following your mother. So I'm so grateful for all of you. And to my other mother, will you come and make me look forgettable?
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She'd been picking them up and laying them down, moving to the next town for a while, needing a rest, still do. Some moth growing under her feet, plus a solid man who enjoyed a good fight with a brave woman. She needed a man who didn't mind her bodacious manner, varied talents, hard laughter, multiple opinions, but her hopes were getting slender. He had great big eyes like diamonds, and his teeth shined just like gold. Some women, for a lot of reasons, women didn't like him, but he satisfied their souls. He needed a woman who didn't mind stepping down from the shade of the veranda, a woman capable of taking up the shaft of the plow and throwing down with him side by side. They met in the glistening, twinkling crystal light of August-September sky. They were both educated, corn-fed, healthy Mississippi stock folk. Both loved fried fish, blues, jazz, and collard greens. He was an unhardened man of the world, but she'd been around the block more than once herself. She wasn't a tough cookie, but a full-grown woman, for sure. For this book, finally coming after 30 years of its production, I want to thank my girlfriend, Sarah Lewis, for writing the foreword. I want to thank Adrian Edwards for writing the introduction. And I just wanted to say something else, something a little more than referencing my own self. I'll leave that to others. This morning, while driving into the city, I had the great pleasure of listening to the radio, and I thought about these ideas about invention, what it meant to be an extraordinary inventor and to come along in a moment when you were an inventor. And then I started thinking about Prince, and I thought about Michael Jackson, and I thought, you know, the reason that we're going to miss them is because they were extraordinary inventors. You know, and so then, I put on Michael Jackson's Thriller, and I listened to You're Gonna Be Starting Something. Now, most songs in popular culture last for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. That's about it. You're Gonna Be Starting Something lasts for 7 minutes. And through that, he takes us through an extraordinary set of possibilities, right? That there are these incredible rhythms, the orchestration, the inventiveness of this piece is absolutely amazing. It really belongs in the hallmark of jazz, but it's really situated in popular culture because we really didn't have any place else to put it. And then I thought about what we're doing. That led me to think about our production, about the extraordinary artists that are in this room who are developing systems of representation, systems of construction that are absolutely new, that absolutely nobody has seen anything else like it before. And that what we do is to change not only how we think of the representation of ourselves as blacks and all that kind of bullshit, which is important but not the only thing, but rather what our extraordinary gift is to the country and to the world of understanding contemporary visual art. And that the reason that the work is so important is because it is laying down the territory for an understanding about what it means to be a contemporary artist now. And we will shape the directions for years to come of what art historians, what other artists do, what is published, how it's thought about, what the questions are, what the issues are, what the ideas are, what the concepts are, that all of that in an amazing way starts with us. It's pretty extraordinary to know that you are actually the forerunners, the front runners, laying it down. To all the artists in the room, I know that it's a little difficult, but to all the artists in the room, I would just ask you just to stand, please. To the artists that are in the room who are laying down the new territory and the new scope of what is and what will be, I ask you to stand. And I say to you humbly that I am glad to be living in a time with you to share the honor. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael and Sarah, for this lovely shindig. Thank you all for celebrating with us. I have a friend dictionary at home, and when I look beside the name Sarah Lewis, it says, first intelligence, incomparable warmth, and overflowing charm. And right beside it says, also see gratitude. And that's a concise entry. Roddy Roy, identify yourself. Roddy, where you there? All right. Walking, such a mundane, commonplace act, and yet one so imbued with symbolic significance. Independence, discovery, freedom, dignity. Every step we take is a movement from departure to arrival, propelled by desire, whether born of necessity or choice. It's no surprise then that many photographers concerned with human dignity have chosen to tell their stories from street level. Walking is a barometer, they know, and so the way someone walks, dejected or sprightly, and how that person is treated, as stroller or trespasser, reveals what kind of place, what kind of society even, is being passed through. How vulnerable are we in public? How are some of us treated, threatened, or perceived as threats because of our skin color? And how do people demonstrate their frustrations with public slights, or worse, dangers that reduce their dignity and that of their fellow human beings? In essence, what does human dignity look like from on foot? Radcliffe Roddy Roy has been pursuing those questions by wandering the streets, convinced that to show people walking or having walked is to show the human condition. He roams around tirelessly, alert to the ways in which people move past each other, whom they ignore, whom they admire, how they interact. These are the abiding concerns. A student of what urban activist Jane Jacobs called the intricate sidewalk ballet, Roy is especially concerned with what it means to belong. To that end, injustice and inequality are at the center of his focus. He documents them up close, literally. He almost always is near the people he sets his eyes upon, usually the poor, the homeless, the dispossessed. In Roy's photographs, people are put in conversation, often playfully so, with their surroundings. Signage serves as comment. A bus-stop advertisement that says, "Love thy neighbor," is both backdrop and exhortation. Color doubles as a key to mood. Shadows of protesters thrown against the wall are soaked in blood red, capturing the rage and sorrow of the moment. Lines and shadows perform a geometric dance. A Euclidean spirit marks his compositions. The results are images characterized by intimacy and lyrical warmth, and alive to irony. Roy takes his vision to Instagram, trying to awaken his more than 250,000 followers to the lives of people who are all too often forgotten or ignored. He does this first with his images, and does it again with captivating stories that accompany each posting. In the spirited conversations among his followers that appear beside each image, the word most frequently mentioned, by far, is dignity. And no wonder. His Instagram page insists that invisible be made visible. I want to walk with them on Main Street, he says, in a manner that speaks to their lives as individuals with dignity who deserve a square of my Instagram feed. He has walked in rhythm with foot traffic all over the United States the past few years, hoping to show the faces of those whose lives are spent living in protest. The resulting series, When Living is a Protest, reminds us that to walk is to bear witness, for we are pilgrims all.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. Thank you, Aperture. Thank you, Michael and Brendan, and all of you here. I'm proud to be among you. This is an excerpt from my piece on Lorna Simpson, who is, well, it would. I'm glad I'm nearsighted. It would make me too nervous, but she's there. Lorna Simpson resists what her viewers, all viewers, consider their authority. Her work demands that we speculate, investigate. What Simpson withholds is certainty. The certainty of familiar visual tropes and textual sequences, the certainty imposed and incited by race, gender, and class histories. Viewing a photograph or collage of hers, you ask, what am I looking at and for? What am I projecting onto what's here? What do I have to let go of? Meaning has everything to do with generative uncertainty. And with play, wordplay, color at play with our sight and psyches, the play between evidence, interpretation, and invention. In her recent collages, Simpson plays starkly, satirically, exuberantly, with black women whose faces she has cut from old issues of Jet and Ebony. Beneath and beside them, from the same magazines, are civil rights headlines and news stories, tokens from the black media past, hovering between fact and phantasm. The strange sit-in that changed a city. Male bride hubby placed on a year probation. Above each woman is a sumptuous yet ethereal design. Her hair has become a headpiece of swirls and strands, feathery, filigreed, biomorphic, multi-hued. What pleasure Simpson takes in adorning these women with her brushstrokes. I like to imagine that in the old world of black periodicals and neighborhoods, she might have been featured as Madame or Madame Lorna. Designer extraordinaire, her creations sought for the top balls in fashion shows. Think of the disdain, centuries worth, heaped on black women's hair. The resources devoted to remaking it in the image of straight white hair. No wonder blacks so often speak of heads when we mean hairdos. Heads are the stuff of ceaseless invention. Collage is the art of simultaneous translation. Words, images, and mediums trade associations, test each other's identities, and generate new contexts. New mysteries, too. Simpson insists on mystery. Translation always contains the mystery of choices not made that still inflect the text. Take the Negro girl in Jet Number 8, 1957. Her ingenue smile, the demure collar and bow cupping her neck. Below, a headline. Can Birmingham Negroes win the civil rights fight? Did she read that when she was looking for her picture in Jet? What would she and Jet readers have made of the story now beside her, the one that smirks about the Negro seaman arrested for marrying another man? Simpson places that next to the Negro girl's head, as if it could edge into her consciousness any minute. As in the years that followed, it edged and hurtled into ours. The past has been reenacted here as a future that became our present.
It is incredibly humbling for me to be here with so many people I've long admired, to read alongside so many people I've long been inspired by. And it is so meaningful for me to be here at the invitation of my friend, Sarah. I could not imagine my life without her. I couldn't imagine my mind, my heart, or my soul without her friendship. And that grows only more true, particularly as I have what certainly to me is the most profound experience of my life, now being a mother and soon to be a second-time mother. So I just am so grateful for Sarah's work, but admittedly, selfishly, even more grateful for her friendship and her love. And I'm so honored to read an excerpt from The Creative Process by James Baldwin. There are forever swamps to be drained, cities to be created, minds to be exploited, and children to be fed. None of these things can be done alone. But the conquest of the physical world is not man's only duty. He is also enjoined to conquer the great wilderness of himself. The precise role of the artist, then, is to illuminate that darkness, blaze roads through that vast forest, so that we will not, in all our doing, lose sight of its purpose, which is, after all, to make the world a more human dwelling place. It is for this reason that all societies have battled with the incorrigible disturber of the peace, the artist. I doubt that future societies will get on with him any better. The entire purpose of society is to create a bulwark against the inner and the outer chaos, in order to make life bearable and to keep the human race alive. And it is absolutely inevitable that when a tradition has been evolved, whatever the tradition is, the people in general will suppose it to have existed from before the beginning of time, and will be most unwilling and indeed unable to conceive of any further challenges to it. They do not know how they will live without those traditions that have given them their identity. Their reaction when it is suggested that they can or that they must is panic. And we see this panic, I think, everywhere in the world today, from the streets of New Orleans to the grisly battleground of Algeria. And a higher level of consciousness among the people is the only hope we have now or in the future to minimize human damage. The artist is distinguished from all other responsible actors in society, the politicians, legislators, educators, and scientists, by the fact that he is his own test tube, his own laboratory, working according to very vigorous rules, however unstated those may be, and cannot allow any consideration to supersede his responsibility to reveal all that he can possibly discover concerning the mystery of the human being. Society must accept some things as real, but he must always know that the visible reality hides a deeper one, that all our action and achievement rests on things unseen. A society must assume that it is stable, but the artist must know, and he must let us know, that there is nothing stable under heaven. One cannot possibly build a school, teach a child, or drive a car without taking some things for granted. The artist cannot and must not take anything for granted, but must drive to the heart of every answer and expose the question that the answer hides. I seem to be making extremely grandiloquent claims for a breed of men and women historically despised while living and acclaimed only when safely dead. But in a way, the belated honor that all societies tender their artists proves the reality of the point I'm trying to make. I'm really trying to make clear the nature of the artist's responsibility to his society. The peculiar nature of this responsibility is that he must never cease warring with it, for its sake and for his own. For the truth, in spite of appearances and all our hopes, is that everything is always changing, and the measure of our maturity as nations and as men is how well prepared we are to meet these changes, and further, to use them for our health. The dangers of being an American artist are not greater than those of being an artist anywhere else in the world, but they are very particular. These dangers are produced by our history. This continent now may be conquered, but our habits and our fears remain. We are the strongest nation in the Western world, but this is not for the reasons that we often think. It is because we have an opportunity that no other nation has ever had in moving beyond the old world concepts of race and class and caste to create finally what we must have had in mind when we first began speaking of the new world. But the price of this is a long look backward when we came in an unflinching assessment of the record. For an artist, the record of that journey is most clearly revealed in the personalities of the people that the journey has produced. Societies never know it, but the war of an artist with his society is a lover's war, and he does at his best what lovers do, which is to reveal the beloved to himself, and with that revelation to make freedom real.
Good evening, everyone. And to Sarah, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this amazing issue. To Michael, to Brendan, and so many others who participated, to so many friends, this is a real delight. And of course, to Jamel Shabazz for his vision of justice. Well before there was Kehinde Wiley, there was Jamel Shabazz. And his New York street portraiture of subjects framed by regalia of their own making. Black people dignified, noble, shoulders back, but with a slight lean to the side. The top-hatted brother dressed in formal attire, the trappings of a distinguished fraternity of men that evoke the long tradition of Marcus Garvey's ceremonial processions of officers and Black Star nurses, all part of Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, an organization of thousands of America's poorest, standing side by side against the tyranny of their invisibility. From Garvey to the Nation of Islam, to Shabazz and his portraits, we see Black America's royal lineage. And yet these are not timeless images. The backstory of these photographs and Shabazz's witnessing marks 4 decades of recurring economic depressions since the 1970s. These 21st century descendants of the Great Migration from the South and the Caribbean have been the reluctant heirs of parents and grandparents, older siblings, aunts, and uncles. In search of what Richard Wright called the warmth of other suns, and is told recently by Isabel Wilkerson, Black migrants changed America but could not pass along the fruits of their hard work and ambitions to their sons and daughters. In spite of the devastating effects of joblessness, of educational malnutrition, of infrastructure divestment, what these young people in white gloves and hijabs lacked in material resources, they made up for with cultural and spiritual estates, with their own associational lives. Their proud belonging to each other, communal, disciplined, active, depicts a people refusing to be defined by deprivation or deficit. Shabazz's visual diary is the archival record of what the great jazz critic and novelist Albert Murray stated was a community committed to the art of living, the art, that is to say, of enjoyment, without which there can be no such thing as human fulfillment. Dimensions matter. Texture matters. Layers and complexity matter. Shabazz's street photography can have the feel and tone of nostalgia. Even he has evoked the past as better than the present, with such monograph titles as Back in the Days, which collects images from the 1980s or a time before crack, showing his street portraits from 1979 through 1985. Yet in these photographs, cultured and refined, we see pinned flowers, pearl necklaces, fur stoles, and expressions of uncompromising hopefulness. These beautiful women lift their chins and hold their heads high because they anticipate a future that is better than the past. It's hard not to see the deep love of this photographer for his subjects, strangers mostly, but all part of a collective New York humanity, a universe of people who happen to walk the streets of Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, and Brooklyn, the South Bronx, Hell's Kitchen, Jamaica, Queens, and all points in between. Affection is too trite a word to capture the meaning of the long stares, wide-eyed glances, and broad smiles of these proud people. Present in the body of Shabazz's work is a fierce commitment to visibility. His is the artistry of making the unnamed and unnewsworthy and the undocumented appear before us. His lens has always seen more joy, more life, more blackness than our own eyes are capable of seeing. even as we pass these New Yorkers on the street or on the subway or on the boardwalk in the shadow of a bridge between two worlds. Thank you.
I could not have imagined a better set of readings and readers to vivify the ideas of this issue. Thank you so much. I've been inspired by the set of readings and by Darren's unfortunate departure to think about how we might document this, and thought perhaps we can have a photograph of all of us. So we're going to have Margarita stand up for a second and take a photograph too, so that Darren can see us all and we can perhaps wave to him. And I'll send it to him in a minute. So we'll take maybe one of this side and one of the other side, because I think that would be a mistake at this point. So she'll do that.
Should we smile? Should we scream?
I think Hank needs to direct us. Hank, what should we do?
Love.
Love?
Okay, hold on.
Where are you?
Oh, I'll be on the other side. Okay, I'll stand there. Why don't we wave to him, yeah?
Okay, yeah. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hold it down. Nice. A couple more. Okay, let's try this side.
I'm actually going to change my mind.
Okay, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3, wave. Yes. Should we scream? Like, should we? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, say love. 1, 2, 3, love.
So thank you for that. What Darren wanted to do was to be able to, as he said, dance the night away. He was so thrilled about this issue. So I hope we do something like that. We'll turn the music back on. Thank you so much for everyone for coming. Thank you so much.